ideas, especially from different non-for-profits to lake associations to agencies. So I think it's a valuable committee. If people are interested in becoming or getting onto the email list when I send this out quarterly, please let me know. I'll add you, simply add your name or your email to the list, and you'll get it, the minutes and the agenda. So in case you don't know me, I'm Jim Lieberman. I'm the district manager for the Warren County Soil and Water Conservation District. I'm also the chairman of the committee. Chris Belden, where's Chris right there, is a secretary. Allison Gaddy is the vice chair. And that's as official as it is. So what we're going to do is run through a few things of housekeeping and then get into two different presentations. Normally we just have one, but this month we had one set up and the second was requested. So for those of you who received the July 15th minutes, if I received no corrections to it, and that was via a Zoom meeting, if I could have a motion to approve the minutes, that would be great.
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
And a second?
I'll second it.
Any questions? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Again, this is pretty straightforward stuff. Reports. Dave Wick, I know that we had, you had one of your report came out for, I believe it was the Asian clam since the last meeting we've had.
Yep.
Would you like to mention that now, or would you like to cover that under new business and project updates?
Yeah, we can wait towards the end. Looks like you have a pretty full agenda today.
Okay, great. I didn't receive anything else specifically for reports. And yeah, we haven't had correspondence directly to the group for quite a while. So we'll get right into the presentations. I'd like to introduce Michael Martin. He's Cedarwood Engineering. He's an environmental scientist and project manager. And I've known Mike for a number of years now, and was fortunate enough to get asked to come down to the Lake George Escape camping area, which is like probably about a mile from our office here, downriver, and take a look and see what was going on as far as wetland restoration. And nice article in the Post-Star on that. And we were fortunate enough to get Mike to do a presentation on the project. So I will turn it over to Mike. I will say if anybody has comments, if you haven't used it before, there is a chat function at the bottom of the screen. Just go ahead and throw a question in there. It works out very well. So, Michael?
Okay, thank you very much. Let's get our screen right going here. Everybody see that all right? Yes, okay. I'm looking for people raising their head. So, yeah, the Lake George Escape Camping Resort just down the road from the Warren County offices has been involved for some time in restoring their wetlands and shoreline on the Scroon River. So I want to run through the background and mostly highlight the work that was done this past summer. So this is another title for this is How I Spent My Summer Vacation. Cedarwood Engineering is a small engineering firm, mostly municipal clients doing water and wastewater. And as the environmental scientist, I'm involved in stormwater and wetlands and permitting. So if you don't know where Lake George Escape Camping Resort is, this is the Northway here. The laser pointer. So we have the Northway, Route 9 running into Warrensburg, and 175 acres of the park is right there, nestled along the Scroon River. This is a little closer shot. The campground itself, where camping is allowed, is pretty much the open area where you see some roads. There's about 175 acres of total property and 9,900 feet of frontage on the Scroon River. So I'm not sure exactly when the park was created, but sometime in the 50s or 60s. And beginning around that time and probably continuing into the 80s, there was illegal filling going into wetlands. Some of this obviously was prior to the APA Freshwater Wetlands Act. And the filling was to create campsites in areas that were low, to create roads through wetlands so they could get to other parts of their property. Now in 2005, the park was purchased by its current owners. Equity Lifestyle Properties is a international company out of Chicago, and they run a number of RV resorts up and down the east, I guess all over the United States, in fact. So in 2012, the APA and the Army Corps began discussions with the park owners about dealing with the wetland violations, and settlement agreement discussions began then, and things went back and forth. In 2014, a remediation plan was submitted to the APA and the Army Corps. However, after that, it just kind of sat. Comments from the APA and the Army Corps were never addressed, and the engineering firm that was doing that work was kicked off the project. So in probably May or June of 2019, the project was handed to me, and we amended the plan and all of the designs, and were able to receive APA and Army Corps approval to move ahead with the actual restoration. And then we had to do the DEC stormwater pollution prevention plans and all the other things that are required. So in 2020, work began in early February and continued until early March, and then everything was shut down. But we were able to restart again in early May because the campgrounds were considered essential businesses, and the work we were doing was tied in with that. And it was shortly after that time anyways, that the governor said that I guess we went into phase 3 or phase 4. So here's a map of all the different restoration sites. Anything that starts with WR is a wetland restoration. There's some here. And then SR is a shoreline restoration sites. So there's quite a lot of areas scattered throughout the park, and each of these sites has multiple activities that took place at them. But I want to first start with talking about restoration of some of the culverts. So this is South Pass, which is one of the main roads that allows campers to get to the south part of the campground. And this is what it looked like before we did our work. So that's the road going south. There's 2 large culverts that don't even sit in the water, and there's a number of small culverts that you can't see that are below the water level, but they're maybe 8 to 12 inch culverts. So very little organism passage able to go up and down. This stream to the south is a huge wetland, and then it flows down and into the scroon. So one of the things we had to be concerned about is if you look, this is really a wetland area that we were trying to put in giant arch culverts so that we could open up the passage. And so we had to design a way that these culverts could be put in place on wetland soil and not sink out of sight. So our design is basically excavating down till you hit a solid or relatively solid base of sand and muck mix, put in a layer of shot rock to bring it up to a certain elevation. That's topped with number 2 stone for leveling, and then an 8-inch thick reinforced concrete pad on which the culvert itself sits. And then that again is topped with soil and rock just to prevent scouring. So I don't know if you've ever seen any of these large aluminum open bottom culverts, but when you get them, this is what they look like. There's actually 2 30-foot long, 18.5-foot wide culverts sitting in this pile right here. And it didn't come with very many instructions, so it was pretty interesting to the first one when it was going up. These are those 8-inch thick reinforced concrete footer pads. So the work began by first building a cofferdam around 1/2 of that South Pass so that work could be initiated in putting in the first culvert. And here you see the cofferdam going in. And then once that was in place, the area was excavated. This is actually, in this picture, it has been excavated down to more or less solid material. It was a little mushy. So this fabric goes down, and then all the stone layers go on top of the fabric to make a nice stable base. In this picture, the number 4 stone, which is almost like riprap, the shot rock is in there, and then the leveling course is on top of that already. And this shows one of the footers completed without the concrete pads. So here are the concrete pads. They've been laid in and leveled and then backfilled with some number 2 stone around the edges. And once that was done, then the coffer excavation began on the second one. And so that's the second footer in place for the first culvert. And you'll see there's a channel that runs along here and here, and that's where the actual aluminum box culvert sits down into. So it locks it into the base. And that channel is bolted down into the cement footers. And here they are putting up the first pieces. And it took a couple weeks, but this is what it looked like when it was completed, more or less. So you can see we've got the water level here, which would be about here on the culvert. So everything else is below grade. This is just a shot inside the culvert. So inside the culvert was not stone. It was all just the native material. And if you notice, there's a lot of bolts, and every single one of those bolts had to be torqued, and then it had to be let sit for 24 hours and then retorqued, so that you make sure that the thing isn't going to twist. And then the head walls are put up. So one of the important things about these aluminum box culverts is that they get their rigidity not necessarily by the shape, but by the material that's packed in around them. So you have to put in compactable material. We use number 52 stone, which is a mix of small and medium-sized stone, and it's put in 8-inch lifts and then compacted all the way up evenly on each side. And that ensures that the culvert base won't deform outward when there's load put on it. So here you can see the side of the culvert with some of that stone put in, and then that was just backfilled with item 4, which is a road sand. And this is right after we opened it up. The culvert isn't complete, obviously, but we were able to open up and get the flow through there, which was the next step is then to make a cofferdam to put in the second culvert. And here we have the first culvert's in place under this sand, and the second culvert is nearing completion here. This just shows you some of the utility conduits that were put in. We've got a 4-inch pipe for water line, a couple of 4-inch pipes for primary electric, and these are all secondary electric. This is what the road looked like when it was done. You'd hardly know anybody was there. But the big difference is when you look in the profile. So instead of having 2 culverts sitting up in the air, not allowing anything to happen, we've now got 18.5-foot wide openings to allow aquatic organism passage and just better water flow. So here's before and after. So that's quite an improvement. There was also a single culvert that was put in on that same stream, but down closer to the Scroon River. I'm not going to go through all the details, but this is what it looked like before. We just had fill in a lot of small culverts. I think there was 3 or 4 little culverts in there. And when we were done, this is what that looked like. So the whole stream width is now open. This is upstream end flowing down through. And this is a look at that road. Because of the size of the culvert, we added a little hump to the road, but it's, it's for the betterment of the environment. So one of the largest wetland restorations and remediations we did is at this site, WR9, which is near the park entrance. There's nearly 2 acres of wetlands that were restored and or created in this spot. So some of the wetland restoration was restoring what had been filled, but because we can't remove all of the fill, we also created wetlands during the process. So this is what that area looks like. It's just big, wide open. It goes way off down in here. And at one point there were campsites down there, but they haven't been used in anybody's memory. But so there's gravel roads and a lot of different fill all back in there. So this is showing the area after it had been excavated. And this front part towards us here was not wetland before. And we knew that because when we dug down, we never hit any wetland soil. So we overdug by 6 inches and then brought in 6 inches of manufactured wetland soil. And this is nearing completion, hasn't been planted, but in the spring when the area was still wet, you can see that it was retaining water. And we set the elevation to be equivalent to the elevation on the outside of the silt fence, which was the existing wetlands in the area. And this is what it looks like now. A lot of plants that we planted came up, but then a lot of natural plants just came up. This is all cattail back there, which you can't seem to control. But usually what happens when you're restoring wetlands, if you uncover and get back down to the natural soil that was there however long ago when it was buried, there's still viable seed stock in there. And so you'll get plants that will come up. And so I was very pleased with the amount of different types of wetland plants that showed up in this area. WR7 and WR8 are what they called land bridges. Basically, it's just fill through a wetland, and those had to be removed. So this is what one of those land bridges looked like. There was a couple culverts in here, not very big. Most of the time in the spring, these are just totally overtopped by floodwaters anyways. So this is looking back the other way, but that whole area, land bridge, was excavated down to surrounding elevations. And then the banks were planted with trees and shrubs. A wetland seed was put in the middle. And you can see I had them excavate it kind of rough. The tendency for contractors is to make everything smooth, and for a wetland restoration, that's not what you want. So we actually have hummocks and low spots throughout this area. Another land bridge went across what they call Frog Pond in this area here. And that's the land bridge. And this is it during excavation. So you see we have our silt curtains out. These are filter socks along the edge. And you can see this work was done early in the spring. And this is the completed excavation. So this is all Frog Pond here. And the 2 shorelines restored with seeding and vegetation. One of the things that we did to create wetlands was to take a number of sites along the river in this area and excavate them back down to a wetland elevation, take the sites out of service and create what we call wetland depressions. So you have a number of RV sites with little trees and shrubs in between them, and we just excavated out the sites and left the trees and shrubs to create this chain of connected wetland depressions. So this is one of them being excavated here. There's another one in the background, but so in this case, we dug a deep test pit, and because we're right on the Scroon River here, it's basically all sand. So we over excavated beyond our target depth and then brought in wetland soil in these places too. And this is some of the finished wetland depressions. They've been planted, they haven't been seeded yet here, but you see they're all interconnected. So there's the road that runs along the river is over on this side, and you have all these interconnected wetland depressions now. And this is looking down the road. So these grass berms are protecting the wetlands as are the fence. But this whole area here was all campsites, and now it's these wetland depressions. And I think there was about 15 to 16 campsites that were taken out of service and turned into wetlands. And then we did riverbank restoration all along the river. And what happened, you know, everybody that has a site on the river wants to walk down, and over the years, walking in and out of the banks had caused areas of erosion. So we'd have deep gullies going down into the river. So all of these gullies had to be repaired, and then we created access points that were reinforced at several locations. So people are no longer allowed to actually go down, excuse me, from their site down into the river unless they have an access point. So some of the wetland or stream bank restoration was fairly simple. You see one here and one there. These were just eroded depressions, and so the natural berm was rebuilt with fill, and topsoil was added, and then shrubbery was, native shrubs were planted to protect the area. There will be a sign here, and you'll see that sign later. The majority of the stream bank restorations required root wad placements. So here's a bunch of trees that have been uprooted that will be used in root wad restoration. So these, the way these work is, here we've got a big depression. It's dug out back into the shoreline, and the logs are placed with the roots facing slightly upstream at the edge of the riverbank. And then there's a log underneath it to keep them from sinking down, and there's rocks on top to hold them in place. And then this is all backfilled, so you reach the original elevation of the berms on both sides. So here you see a finished one. There's actually a couple of logs in here. This is a shot of another area, just giving you more of a view, a riverside view. And this one is nearly completely finished. It's been seeded and mulched, but the shrubs haven't been planted in this one at this point yet. So every one of these access sites required to have this sign that explains why the work has been done and why people aren't supposed to use those areas anymore. So one of the biggest areas of erosion were on the beach. So this is the lower end of the beach. The stream is flowing that way. And this is undercut all the way and around the corner. And then on the other side of the beach, you can see all the undercutting going on here as well. And these were repaired the same way with the root wads, but in this case, I think there was 5 or 6 logs on the upstream side. And these wrap all around. There's about 15 logs total by the time you get around the corner here.
Good morning. How are you?
So we minimize the amount of trees that were cut in the process, and then the areas are replanted.
Define the categories. They seem pretty self-explanatory.
So I mentioned that we created reinforced river access sites, and what we did was use this material called ShoreMax, which is a thin rubber material, has little nubs on it, so it kind of grips the ground. And these were used, one of the main access sites that we created is actually a log stairway that goes down to the river. And at the top of that, we have that ShoreMax matting placed, goes out about 10 or 15 feet so that people are not eroding the path down to the river. And this is another one of the access sites. We had one with stairs, and the other 2 are more just like a gentle ramp. So you can see we have a root wad here protecting that bank. And then we contoured it all down, put the ShoreMax on the slope leading right down to the edge of the river. And that way people can walk on that without causing further erosion. And this too will all get planted with shrubs on the sides. So Lake George Escape Campground is very proud of the work they did. And they had a ribbon cutting ceremony, and they made this big poster that's out by their main lodge, featuring the work that they did and focusing on that one big wetland restoration that I first showed you. So here we are at the ribbon cutting ceremony. That's the South Pass with the 2 culverts. So all told, we restored or created over 5 acres and over 350 feet of eroded shoreline repaired. It's probably well over that. Nobody really measured it. We enhanced the river access by creating reinforced access points and then restoring the unauthorized access points. And then we greatly enhanced aquatic organism passage by putting in the 3 wide culverts and also removing the land bridges that were preventing fish and other organisms from swimming upstream up out of the scroon in the spring. So the total cost was about 1.3 million, which is design, construction, materials, and a lot of the work was hauling out material, soil, and hauling in material. So with that, I'd just like to say, put in a word for Pat Galusha's construction company. They did the work, and I think they did a really nice job out there. And I guess I'll take questions.
All right. If anybody has any questions, go ahead. I don't see anything in the chat, which is fine, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I guess, Mike, the one thing I would point out is, if people think that this is just a simple job and with a lot of layout, I was talking to my board chairman here, and those culverts, he said there's a lot of bolts. And if I recall from what we've done, and when I was talking to the guys when they were working on it, what was there, between 1,500 and 2,000 1-inch bolts on each one of those structures?
Well, these were wider. I think we estimate about 3,000 bolts, and there were various lengths depending on how much material you had to go through.
And again, people might think they're just turning bolts, but you said you have to let them set and retorque. Well, let me tell you, one of the things that you don't realize is that these are aluminum, and sitting out in the sun, they become scorchingly hot. So
yes.
Safety is a big issue. Smacking your head on these things if you're in there is an issue too. But the other thing is, we have a lot of campgrounds in the county, and it's important to know what's going on in your community, because this is in the town of Lake George, but everybody thinks it's part of Warrensburg because it's so close. But the population, if this was full, is around what, 4,000 people? Is that?
Well, yeah, there's 550 or so sites.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think it was
3 or 4 people.
Yeah, upper 3,000-4,000, which is larger than the vast majority of our towns. So, on a summer's day, you can have a significant influx of people there. It's just amazing to see how much use that these campgrounds get. So, but yeah, I thought it was a great project, and I appreciated you contacting me to come down there and take a look at it. I mean, as you can tell, I was thrilled when I was walking around with them. Like, this is really cool, because what was it, after about 10 minutes, I'm like, hey, you want to do a presentation at our water quality meeting?
Yeah, it's I worked on a lot of wetland restorations, but certainly this is one of the biggest projects I've ever worked on. And the culvert stuff was new to me, and that was really fascinating, that you can put these structures in and basically have an unimpeded stream bottom. So you've got better flood control, but you've also got better aquatic organism passage.
Yeah. All right, any other questions for Mike?
Hey, Mike, this is Randy from the LGA. Just a question on the campsites that you guys improved along the shoreline.
Yes.
And you kind of remade the wetlands, and you cleaned out all that fill. Was that fill that was brought in, or was that stuff that was deposited during flood events? Any ideas on that?
When we created the wetland depressions,
Yes.
That was fill that had been brought in.
Okay.
But the sites, they weren't using the sites because they were kind of low and damp anyways. So it made sense to just excavate them a little further and turn them into bona fide wetlands.
Yeah, and I'm just going to reiterate what Jim said. Great project. Were they required to do that, or they just
Yes.
wanted to improve that?
Yes, this was all a settlement agreement with the Adirondack Park Agency and the Army Corps of Engineers. And so there's a lot of conditions. There's a new deed restriction in place now that all of the wetlands that exist on the property are protected, even though they are protected. Now it's in their own deed, specifying, you know, they got to stay out. They can't do anything in any of the wetlands or change any of the wetlands.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Mike? All right, Mike, if it's okay, we'll get a copy of your presentation, and if you don't mind, we can send it out via PDF, if that's okay.
Yep, I will do that. It'll probably be a large file, but I'll get it to you.
And then we'll, you know, that has Mike's contact info if you have any questions on that. I know he has to take off and come down here.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, and we appreciate that.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
All right. So now we're going to roll right into our second presentation. This is the evolution of proposed county septic inspection and transfer law. Chris Belden from the Warren County Planning Department and Claudia Bramer, Warren County Supervisor, are going to present on this. Nick, if you can make Claudia and Chris co-hosts, that would be great.
I sure can.
All right, I'll let you two take the controls.
Okay, thank you so much, Jim. We really appreciate the opportunity to present to the group. I do want to say quickly, I was at the Lake George Escape ribbon cutting, and it was really cool to see the wetland restoration project that they did there at the bridge. And I didn't get a chance to go around the whole campground to see the other areas, so that was really nice to see their presentation in detail about all the different areas that they restored, which was really cool. Interestingly, I didn't know it was a settlement agreement, but still great job by them. So again, thank you for the group hearing from us. I think you received in your agenda packet. So let me back up quickly. I'm Claudia Bramer. I'm the chair of the Environmental Concerns Committee at Warren County. And I sent to Jim a memo with the background on what's been happening and some of the materials. It should have been in your agenda packet. I'm not planning to go through all of that stuff in detail. I can leave it to you to read at your leisure or whenever you need something to help you go to sleep. But it does go through the background that we have had at the county level, kind of just stewing this over for the last, it's been about 2 years, January of 2019. I see that Mr. Simpson is on. One of his, I'm not sure if it's a constituent, but it was at the time the executive director of the Adirondack Lakes Alliance came to the committee. He was talking about some other water quality issues and mentioned the idea of the county looking into a law that was similar to what Queensbury was working on at the time. I'm not sure if they had already passed it at that time, January of 2019. They must have. So at that time, we started the ball rolling a little bit. And I think that the general consensus at the county is that we do care a lot about water protection. Obviously, we have the queen of the lake, you know, Lake George is the queen of American lakes. So we do know how important it is to protect our lakes. I think the stumbling blocks are around how exactly do we want to accomplish a law that will bring some consistency around the county as to property owners and realtors and attorneys understanding whether or not they must do some sort of inspection of the septic system at the time of transfer. You know, there are other areas in the state where they do a regular periodic inspection, and they require that certification to be turned into the regulating agency, whoever that is, every, say, 3 or 5 years. I've looked at some laws in Cayuga, you know, in the Finger Lakes, And even I recently obtained a copy of the town of North Elba. They are doing a regular inspection requirement. So I think this came from some of the other work that was done already by the Lake George Waterkeeper. The studies that demonstrated a lot of people don't even know what their septic systems are. They don't know when the last time they've been maintained. And some of them don't even know where they are on the property. So it's just a concern that unknown about what is happening with the septic systems. And also now we're seeing some data showing, like in Glen Lake, I've been attending a couple of their Glen Lake Association meetings, and they are really attributing improved water quality to the Queensberry septic inspection law and the fact that people are taking the steps to upgrade their septic systems. So all of that to say that I think we have consensus that something should be done, but how do we make that happen at a county level, and what is the most appropriate mechanism, or the mechanism that can get enough consensus to actually pass through the county board? What you should have in your packets is the proposal right now, which is, so I'm gonna get into a little bit of the details. It would require third-party inspections at transfer, unlike Queensberry, which I believe they use their staff people to go out and do the inspections. This is more like Bolton, where they would have the third-party inspector go out and provide some sort of report that would then come back to the county building and codes. And building and codes would either give them their blessing, give them a certification to move forward, or they would say, it doesn't pass, and then the landowner, in cooperation with the county Department of Buildings and Codes, would have to come up with some sort of remediation plan to make sure that the system is actually going to work at the end of this. Not necessarily bring it up to full current code, but make sure it's a functioning system. And right now, the way the law is proposed is that it would apply to properties within 250 feet of certain water bodies. And there's a list of the water bodies at the end of the proposal. And the reason it's set up that way, and this is still up for debate and discussion, it was just brought up the last meeting, maybe we should really expand that list. The reason it was initially limited to the list that we have is because at the same time this whole septic inspection process was developing, we also at the county were going through this process of talking to DEC and trying to get our water bodies on the list of water bodies that DEC would provide grant funding directly to property owners to help them upgrade their systems. And they had a pretty narrow set of criteria that we could use in order to get the funding. So the list right now that you see as part of the law is the same list that we submitted to DEC so that property owners could get money potentially for upgrading their systems. So in my mind, it was a way to say to property owners, okay, you are going to be subject to this law, but there's a possibility you could get help with funding in addition to the other funding that's out there. I'm sorry about my birds in the background. So those are the biggest things. I wrote in my memo to you guys that some things I was hoping you would maybe weigh in on are, should this be presented as an opportunity to leverage county resources, meaning buildings and codes, to assist the local communities, our towns, that want to participate? And if so, should we allow the municipalities to opt out of participation or opt in through the adoption of a resolution by a town board, rather than mandating it across the board for all the towns, other than places like Queensberry and Bolton and Glens Falls, which pretty much only has sewer. There could be a few properties there with septic, but anyway, that's one idea. And then should the law really apply to more water bodies in the county so that we are being more consistent and everyone knows if you're on a water body, then you've got to go through this process, rather than just limiting it to the list of water bodies that we provided. And there was also an idea that we should expand applicability from 250 feet within the water body to actually out to 500 feet within a water body. So those are some of the things. I know that there are some details within the language of the law that need to be improved. Chris Belden has given some great suggestions. I don't have all of this in front of me right now, Chris. I don't know if we need to get into the weeds of that, because I think they're pretty technical. And I'm hoping for a higher level discussion right now. I don't know. And Chris also did a great presentation to the county committee about, it was almost a year ago now, talking about septic systems and some of the things that they are seeing in Queensbury as far as issues with the D box and how that is all working. So I think that's in your packet if you want to look through that, but I'm assuming all of you guys are pretty knowledgeable about the functioning of septic systems. And also one of the assistant county attorneys weighed in and had some changes on the actual language, but all of that I think we can work through. There is currently, like in Queensbury, a variance. Well, it's not really a variance, is it? It's more of some properties would be excluded from the applicability if the residence, for instance, if the residence is going to be demolished and nothing is going to be replaced, or if they are planning on replacing it with a brand new system. And then the law also includes a process for appealing to the county committee if a property owner, for instance, did not like what the remediation plan was that was being proposed between their own engineer and, say, county buildings and codes. So we've got that covered. There are some questions about how do we roll in the towns that also do their own septic approvals. But maybe that can be taken care of by only allowing certain towns, or not allowing, but offering this to certain towns to opt in or opt out of the law. Chris, do you want to add anything? And then I'd love to ask for questions or feedback or anything. Going forward, I think we'll do some more public outreach, talking to stakeholders like the realtors, who I do want to thank the working group. We have met a couple times. It involves, like Allison Gaddy, I see on here, a couple of the realtors, and my mind is blanking. I'm sorry, guys. But those people, people on the working group have been giving some great input, and I do think we can talk to other stakeholders and the public, because eventually we want the public to know this would apply to them. So Chris, I'm gonna see if you have anything to add, and then if anybody else has any comments, including Travis.
Yes, I see Travis has a comment. I guess just quickly, I think this is, we're looking for just kind of a higher level conversation about, how this would impact the various lake associations around Warren County. Like Supervisor Bramer indicated, we've had meetings of the working group. There's been meetings of the Environmental Concerns Committee to kind of suss out what exactly the board is intending to do. So we thought there had been some discussion at the last Environmental Concerns meeting to do some kind of stakeholder outreach and education with the public. And this seemed like a great forum to begin that conversation, given that the intent of the law is to protect water quality, and this is the Water Quality Strategy Committee. So I guess if anybody has any input, I think that's where we're at right now. And Claudia did mention there's a lot of complicated nuance with this law. It's not as simple as just passing a law. Septic is regulated differently throughout the county. The presentation that Jim sent out last week kind of touches on the complexities and so on. But I guess right now, if there's any kind of input as to what this should apply to, impacts you may be concerned about, whatever else is on your mind. I guess that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I want to mention one more thing, because I see Connor Gillis's name on here. He did do a presentation back to the committee, and this was a year ago. And what was really encouraging there was he's from the Southern Adirondack Realtors, and they did a presentation that was based on a survey that had been done, and it did say 8 in 10 residents support requiring a septic system inspection upon the sale of a home or property so that any problems found can be fixed at that time. And when they asked a question about the reason for having such an inspection, the support for the proposal increased because it said people understood that reducing pollution in local lakes and rivers is a strong reason to support the inspection requirement. So I think that we'll get public support. It's just a matter of making sure that the mechanisms work and that it's a practical system. Like Chris said, there's so many different ways that septic systems are regulated in Warren County, and it's not always it's not consistent. So,
Yeah.
Anybody? Travis, I don't know if you can unmute yourself or if you're only on chat.
Where is he?
I see him there. While we're waiting for Travis, does anybody else have anything?
Yeah.
Any burning thing you want to say? This is stupid. This, you need to go back to the drawing board.
Claudia, as Dave Wick, I think the idea definitely has good merit. I read through the, I guess it was the survey of public support for it, which was actually pretty surprising to me how strongly the public does seem to support the idea, especially when tied back to the value of our water bodies. I think, every few years we start to make slow progress on different things. And this is, when I was at Soil and Water, Jim and I and the crew did a review of Spruce Lake, and taking a look at one of the topics was septic system on transfer. The town of Chester had it on the books, but wasn't actively enforcing it. So we
Right.
met with the towns of Scroon and the town of Hork and just said, here's something that isn't overly burdensome. It's not every 3 years you're paying X amount to have your septic pumped out. It's that next iterative process that is, we're trying to fix things in a slow manner that isn't really terrible from a regulatory standpoint, that kind of meets the public intent. So I think the idea of having the county take the leadership really has a lot of value. What is the current, I'd say it's that idea is done pretty well in your environmental concerns committee. What is the take on the overall board of supervisors at the current stage?
Trying to think of the other, what other supervisors around. I think that there's still consensus around the idea for water quality protection. I think, like Supervisor Dickinson has been very vocal at the committee level that he does not want this to be mandatory because he feels like Lake George already has something going. They want to keep moving forward with that and not, I guess, I think he sees it as sidetracking with this mandatory county layer. And I see that Supervisor Simpson is on, and I know he has concerns. So I'd be happy to.
Well, water quality has been one of our primary focuses in the town of Hork and having Brant Lake and the east shore of Scroon Lake. But it's even more complicated. We see a lot of new homes being built in Horicon, and we go through the septic variance process where lots aren't, they're not perfect lots. So, we're actually talking about creating our own septic transfer law that goes beyond just, a footage requirement from the lake. I mean, we think that, wells should be protected. Really, it's all water quality. It's not just the lakes. It's primarily, this law at the county would be, 250 or 500 feet. I know we've had different discussions on that from the water body, but I think that we're going to look at a townwide septic transfer law to improve the situation with, potential negative impacts from faulty septic systems on neighboring wells or water systems. There's also
or tributaries.
Yeah.
Major.
I mean,
so you're looking at something more like Bolton did.
Yeah, we are. And,
Okay.
and I'm actually working with the town of Bolton. I mean, it goes beyond that. You have vernal pools, which, that's been a topic of discussion, in the Adirondack Park at the agency and in decisions. And, you know, we just have to be careful that we're not picking winners and losers. We really need to stand for, you know, water quality everywhere. I mean, those wells, you know, these septic variances, it's getting more difficult. You know, lots that are left are really non-traditional lots, and they need to be looked at more closely.
Okay,
Yeah.
Travis, can see it asked a comment earlier. Can he?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, okay, great. I just wanted to comment that besides, you know, water quality of the lakes and water bodies that you're discussing now, which obviously, you know, is extremely important. I think we're missing the issue that this is really a consumer protection issue as well. I know you've heard me comment on other things where, you know, that look like there are unintended damages or consequences based on certain actions. Well, I think in this case, it's just the opposite. I think that I believe there are advantages that are not being discussed. And if they were, maybe it would be easier to, you know, right now you're arguing about whether it should be, you know, one water body or another might be included on this. I noticed Halfway Creek, for instance, runs right through Queensbury, empties into the Hudson. There, you know, a lot of houses border that, and still, you know, that's not on either the local or the proposed county list. But really, the issue to me is I attended many meetings when this was being discussed in Queensbury and it took years. It took way too long to get this thing through. And in the end, it was limited to just shoreline properties on the lake. But, you know, there are so many people in my neighborhood, which is nowhere near the lake, that have failed septic systems simply because they don't even know what they have in the ground. These are people that, you know, moved in from the city or other areas. I mean, I'm 60 some odd years old. I've owned a number of houses. This is the first house I've ever owned with a septic system. I was somewhat concerned about it. I asked the fellow I bought it from, you know, well, how often does it have to be pumped? Where is it? He didn't even know where it was. So that was some concern. I couldn't find it until the spring when obviously the biologic activity, you know, melted the snow there first. And I said, okay, there it is. So I got it pumped out. Everything's great. But, you know, a lot of my neighbors, not so much. So it's kind of amazing to me that in the state of New York and its reputation doesn't have a statewide septic transfer law, as does Massachusetts with Title V, Connecticut, where I recently had to sell a home for a departed in-law, and New Jersey has a statewide. You know, it's a consumer protection deal. I was happy in Connecticut when I sold that home and knew nothing about the status of the septic system, that it was required to be inspected. And I had some sort of assurances, and the buyer had some sort of assurances that there wasn't any problem that neither one of us knew that might turn up later. So, you know, to me, this is a very good way of doing it. If I can take just another couple seconds to tell you where I'm going. In Connecticut, all that was required was for the people that normally pump these things to go ahead and give the okay. There were no agencies, state agencies, even licensing beyond being a septic hauler needed. One of the problems in Queensbury, and I'm still disappointed that Queensbury is not town-wide. It's only, you know, on the properties bordering these water bodies. One of the reasons it's only limited is that they decided that they'd have Dave Hatton and his group conduct the inspections. You know, I would much rather see IBS or any of the other haulers, you know, make that call and say, yeah, it looks like there's a problem or there isn't a problem, etc. And then that doesn't add any additional costs to the government or anything else. So, which is another thing that I'm sensitive about. So at any rate, I believe that while I applaud all of your efforts, and I just think you could go further and make the case that this is really a consumer-friendly proposal, and perhaps expand it to the entire county. Take a step up from what New York is requiring, and look at a place like Connecticut. I think it's great.
Thanks, Travis. Matt, I see you, but I want to give Paul a chance because he had his hand up earlier.
Sorry, I was just going to add, it's interesting, we helped with Lake George's effort. And, I think your point about, I'm aware of Queensbury and Bolton's effort. They, all these communities are doing their own little, their experiments of, what's the best for their own community. I'd be interested. I don't have the answer, but, if there's a countywide one, is how a community could opt out, or by virtue of what they have adopted, it satisfies the goal of the county. And so maybe that's a lead, is to think about, hey, there's a countywide program, but if a local program were to meet X criteria, that could satisfy or, usurp the county program. Lake George's is really interesting what they're doing. If you're not that familiar with it, I mean, they really went, the analysis part of it was in depth, because I think the big question is, how many of these properties, how many are of issue? And I think, if we just talk about it in the sort of academic sense, we think of, well, geez, there's thousands of residential houses, but in Lake George's, they sort of honed in on the analysis and surveyed property owners, looked at the real property data, and then did some pretty technical mapping to identify, what is the actual universe of concern that we're talking about. And the interesting thing was, hey, it's not as, while it's still a major issue and a concern, but it's not as necessarily as extensive as one may have thought it may have been. And so their approach has been to now focus, they're fortunate enough to have, there might be some outside resources, for example, to help offset costs to property owners to go and address those areas that are of high priority. That's a really unique example. I'm not saying that's going to work for every community, but it's just showing how one community is doing something a little different. And I just think there could be room for them.
They're very fortunate to have Dan Baruch, who's been driving that process. And like Travis said, we don't want to add a lot of government layers necessarily at the county level, but
right.
You're right. No, they've done a ton of work and very site specific as far as I understand.
Yeah, it is. And it's such a, and so, like I said, I don't have the answer. And I, on a personal level, obviously not that I'm in any position to have a voice at this forum, but at a personal level, obviously I'm an advocate for reasons outlined by both water quality and to Travis's point, that it is a consumer protection model. So kudos to everybody. Well done on the initiative.
Well, I certainly hope everybody in this forum appreciates water quality.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Go ahead.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. Matt, is he frozen or am I frozen?
No, I'm here. No, I just wanted to add to what Travis brought up. He's absolutely correct. My first home purchase was in Queensbury, and I had a home inspection. We bought the house, and 6 months later, we found that we had a rusted out tin can, basically, for a tank. So, being a first-time home buyer and going through that process and discovering that we did everything right in our process to only find out that 6 months later we were faced with a new septic system, and we did that. And interestingly enough, that I just ran into that person that we sold the house to, and they, again, 15 years later, had to replace the leach field because it failed. So
yeah,
there's a great example of, the value of an inspection and consumer protection while also accomplishing clean water goals. So.
Well, maybe the first move is something more simple than what we've got going on, like something that just requires the inspection to be done and let the landowners figure out what it is. Because right now it's still up to whatever's in the contract between the buyer and the seller. You know,
At the time of transfer, you're
at
still.
the time of transfer, I'm saying, yeah. If we just say an inspection must be done, but we don't say what has to be done. Trying to read people's body language, but it's a little hard over Zoom. I don't know. No one's loving that idea. And I see we're at 10 and Jim is probably antsy. But so I thank you guys. And listen, if you want to provide feedback, Jim has my contact information and Chris. And I think Chris and I are going to work on pulling together another meeting of the working group. So anyone is welcome to sit in on those. Probably have to do it over Zoom. So you can certainly join in from wherever you are. And we'll try to hash out some more of the details.
And I believe that the county has the information that was sent out, this agenda plus all the addendums. Don Lehman, I see he's on, if he can confirm that. I think he was posting that information at the county website or at the Facebook page. Looks like Chris is shaking his head. So that information's available. But if anybody who is on this Zoom meeting can't connect to Claudia, please feel free to contact me and I'll send it along to Claudia. So,
Jim?
yes.
Don is on the call as well. He had indicated in the chat that from some of the social media outreach we have done so far on the Warren County level, the main concern from the general public seems to be the cost that will be passed down and who will be responsible for it. So that's something that has been discussed previously in working groups and so on, is kind of that affordability factor, especially for some of the lakes outside of the Lake George watershed, or in some of the more affluent corners of Warren County, is just kind of what those impacts are for families when transferring properties and so on too. So there's certainly a lot of things to consider. Yeah, and I will say too, we didn't mention it before, but regarding Paul's comment about maybe this, and Travis's about maybe we look at expanding this outside of just waterfront areas. We had done an analysis with GIS here. We found that about 10%. So we took a universe of like parcels within 250 feet of water bodies over 20 acres. And that was about 10% of the developed parcels in Warren County. And so on average, that was about anywhere from like 75 to 100 property transfers a year. So in terms of capacity of what the building department could manage, I think those are also some concerns or thoughts that are also going into how a county law will be established, because if there's a higher, if there's a larger capacity need for capacity, then that will mean taking up more staff time of the building department, which may mean more staff, which seems like a hard sell at this point. So yeah, the discussion is ongoing at this point. Allison?
The point, Chris, was not to do it that way. Do it like Connecticut does. In Connecticut, there is no interference with government. It's simply the haulers, which you ought to be having a contact with on a regular basis anyhow. But if they come in to this property and it hasn't been maintained, that'll be in their report, and it'll be in their report for everyone to see. And I believe that if you involved 100% of Warren County, you would be doing us a favor rather than just the 10% or so that might be on one of the named water bodies.
Right, and I was explaining, as things sit right now, we were looking at the building department needing to review reports, roughly 75 to 100 reports a year on top of their existing caseload, or workload. I mean, so I think the idea would be if we were to expand that universe from parcels within 250 feet of water bodies over 20 acres, we're talking, instead of, it's going to be a much larger number, and that the review and the enforcement will then need to be done by somebody, presumably the building department.
Exactly my point, Chris. So I'm trying to get through is you don't want to go down that route. You do want to look at how they do it in Connecticut, et cetera, where you do not need those resources, and therefore you don't have to limit your scope because of that. So, that's the point I'm trying to get across.
I hear you, Travis.
So Travis, just a quick question. Do you know what certificates or training or anything else that they require in Connecticut for haulers or anybody to be an inspector? They do have an inspection program in the Lake George watershed, but I think that would be one of the concerns is if you have a company that comes in and does the inspection who also does the replacements, there could be some, at least initially, some concern that maybe it is not quite impartial. So I just wondered if Connecticut has something in place that, basically makes it more official through a
Connecticut
licensing.
does not. Connecticut does not. I'm not aware, and it's possible that some of your concerns have actually happened there. I'd have to go ahead and, see whether we could find examples. And I'm guessing in state size of Connecticut, you've got more than one complaint over the years, but I don't sense that it's an issue. And in talking to the realtors, they certainly didn't give me the impression that it was a problem. One additional note is that it's interesting to hear what the experiences have been in Queensbury. You ought to maybe get Dave Hatton on here at some point in time, but I haven't heard an update. But initially, he was finding problems in about half of the systems that he looked at. And I think in most every case, it was simply corrected. It was not a big expensive issue. As opposed to what I've seen my neighbors go through here, digging up their entire lawns, trying to find a new area for a septic field, just because they probably hadn't pumped the thing for 10 years and didn't know it was even there.
Right.
It's a kind of like you can pay me now or pay me later, but I'd really like to see that these septic haulers do get around and are, doing regular work. And I'm sure there's some people that might try to take advantage of that, but I'm a little more hopeful that in general, you don't have people looking out, just for themselves.
Travis, who enforces, who oversees the haulers then?
So in Connecticut, there's, as I said, there's no licensing that you can go ahead. I would imagine you say a hauler came in and gave it an okay. And then 6 months later, you find out, like in Matt's case, that there really it wasn't a septic system, it was just a tin can. Well, I imagine now you've got some legal recourse, and that's all outside of, government. And I'm not a big fan of government getting involved and getting their twist in here as well. So I believe that from what I can tell, it works out well in Connecticut. I'd encourage you to do your own Google searches, but that's a model, and you're talking about other models here, and I'm just saying, look at that model as well.
I'll just add, I know Bolton, and I'm sorry, jumping here. Bolton's, many of you are familiar with it more than I am, but they certified local individuals. So it's sort of a hybrid of what Travis says, that certain people, given their profession, whether you're a contractor, et cetera, were eligible to take part in an ongoing series of classes to become septic inspectors. And so they check the box and certify the form that goes with it. It's not necessarily a local department or anyone having to do those. So it is people who are contractors, septic haulers, et cetera. If you did want to have someone who's a third party do that, but ultimately they're checking, they're the ones doing the inspection, checking the box, and it just gets submitted as a form. And therefore the administrative end of it is just making sure said form is checked. That's one thing to think about.
You still run the risk of inconsistencies there. We had a family home that's being sold, and one hauler said it failed, the second said it didn't. And then as the buyer, you wouldn't accept that, and that's fair. So I think there's a learning curve here.
Sure.
Also, it's fair to note that I think in the Queensberry law, I don't know about the Bolton law, that inspections are good for 3 years. So I know there's a lot of, right now it's new and it's, people so often get caught off guard, but most people don't put their house on the market at the spur of the moment. So if you're, you know, as this becomes a consistent thing and something that people know about more and more, you can kind of plan ahead and get your ducks in a row, so to speak, before you put your house on the market, which I think takes a lot of pressure off of people and kind of might answer some of those questions that are coming up as far as who's responsible for what.
Okay. All right, I think it's a great conversation, but we have to continue on with the meeting here. So again, if there's any questions or comments, get them to Claudia or to Chris, or if you can't find how to get a hold of them, please feel free to contact me and I'll forward it along. Look forward to hearing what happens on out. Chris or Claudia, any other final comments?
There was just a comment in the chat if anybody wants to go look about licensing in Connecticut. Louis shared that information, so that's all.
All right, so thanks for the discussion. So moving on to the new business and project updates. Just put on there a moment of silence for Doug O'Brien from town of Chester. Doug had been a longtime member of the committee and did a number of tours, was very active. And I actually, I knew Doug enough that we're friendly and everything, but when I read his obituary, I was pretty much blown away by who he was and what he did. It was amazing. So if we could just have a moment of silence for Doug. All right, thank you. So moving on, the Westbrook Conservation Initiative. So in the last month, for those of you who are not familiar with this, this is the stormwater wetland that was created on the south end of Lake George on the old Charles R. Woods property. Our office manages the maintenance that goes on at the site, and this year we worked with the LGA, Lake George Land Conservancy, and the fund. I should say the staff from them. The town of Lake George, who acted as a hauler for material, in the county. We worked on cleaning out Pond 1, which is the forebay, and it captures the sediment that comes off of Route 9, and that's basically the oil filter, for lack of a better term, for the engine, which is the treatment system. So the sediment was removed, and along with a number of cattails. Cattails have come in, established. They've been very successful in establishing. There are pros and cons to them. So we're not looking at removing all the cattails. There's no feasible way of doing that, but they do have a tendency to block up the flow channels a bit and cause some issues. So we cleaned out on the end of September, took a day and cleaned out Pond 1 and part of Pond 2. And then went back October, first Friday in October, or Thursday in October, and did a lot of cutting of the cattails. By removing the material, the vegetative material, we are able to remove some phosphorus and nitrogen before it goes back into the system. I believe that one of the research scientists from RPI was going to get an estimate of how much phosphorus and nitrogen was removed. Because we have a gross estimate of the volume of cattails and sediment that was removed. So right now, that occurred in the last couple of weeks. Also, there is Phragmites, which is an invasive plant that the committee has decided to try to keep out of there. There was a pesticide application done. It's a stem injection, so it's minor amounts of material used. It's I think a class 2 wetland applicators license for a pesticide applicators license to work in wetlands. So that was done a few weeks ago as well. And chemical sampling of the flow through the system is continuing to be done. and that's by Jim Sutherland and Chris Nowitzki. So all in all, you know, it was a good year for maintenance at the site. There's a fair amount of garbage blown around because of the amount of people that are using it, and basically pop bottles and coffee cups and lids and stuff. And there's still a big problem of, even though there are 2 dog waste stations and 2 or 3 trash cans right on the road, there's an amazing amount of dog waste at the site. So that's just a societal thing, and people are slobs. So Randy, Walt, anybody else who's involved with Westbrook, are there any other comments that you would like to have on the stormwater wetland?
I'll just throw in that I think that didn't the village help out too with hauling one of the days, and the county crews did a lot of they did the dredging and whatnot. They did an excellent job digging, finally tuning the excavator, pulling out the cattails, and we also dredged the pond, or we drained the pond with the county pump, which helped out tremendously, keeping the job super quote unquote clean. We didn't drag sediment all over the place, so that helped out a lot.
Yeah, I'll support that as well, and thank everybody for all the help that we've been getting down there. It's great to see that wetland is functioning as it's intended for both nutrient removal and for sediment removal. And I think it was a great project, so thank you all for your support on that.
Okay. All right, next up, the Upper Hudson River Watershed Coalition. Allison, would you like to give a little update?
I'm not sure that there's too much to update. We do currently have a water quality improvement program grant through the DEC for roadside erosion projects throughout the watershed, and many districts have started doing those projects. So you'll see some towns and highway and the soil and water districts out hydroseeding in the Upper Hudson River watershed. A lot of that's associated with that grant. Otherwise, I don't think there's too much more to update. I will be doing another iteration of the presentation that I did for our Upper Hudson River Revitalization Plan at the Schroon Lake Steering Committee meeting at the end of the month.
Okay. Thank you. The Champlain Watershed Improvement Coalition in New York, Whitney, Randy, since Randy's a representative from the Water Quality Committee, any updates to Whitney?
Yeah, the Quickly folks are just put in an application to the Basin Program for a planning grant, enhanced planning grant, so that we could possibly get some design work done on some climate-ready culverts, which basically we saw get put in at the wetland enhancement at the campgrounds that Mike just talked about. So we're looking for a planning grant from that, and hopefully we'll be successful. And
okay.
That's basically it.
All right, the Lake George Watershed Action Plan, back to Allison.
Sure. The Lake George Watershed Action Plan is a Department of State grant that was awarded to the town of Queensbury. Our organization is working on that with Warren County Planning and the town. We just held our first committee meeting last week. So we're kind of working through the process of establishing goals and visions and the main priorities of the plan. Everything is, all our meetings are open to the public. All the information will eventually will be posted on a project website, which is coming soon. We also have a project Facebook page. It's just the Lake George Watershed Action Plan Facebook page. And let's see, whenever we have meetings, they'll be posted there, to the town of Queensbury calendar, as well as the Warren County calendar, and so a variety of local newspapers. We don't have a whole lot anticipated for the rest of the year on that project, but community workshops and outreach will begin, is anticipated to begin in summer 2021. So everything again will be available to the public and everything will be posted.
All right, so if there's any questions or comments in regards to the Lake George Watershed Action Plan, contact Allison. Again, if for some reason you can't get a hold of her or don't have her contact, send it to me through the Water Quality Group and we'll get it to her. The Adirondack Lakes Alliance, Gary, Ed, Walt, one of you, any of you, are there any updates from the ALA? I know with the COVID, it kind of put a damper on the yearly symposium up at Paul Smith's, but I don't know if anybody has any updates from the ALA. You're all muted. There you go, Ed.
There we go. I feel like I'm sort of a voyeur at this meeting because we've had a change with folks at Adirondack Lakes Alliance, and Mary Randall is the executive director. So I don't want to speak for her. And the associate director is Brendan Wiltsey, who's on the staff at Paul Smith's College. And I know in terms of their work this summer, the conference was a virtual conference. They have, throughout the summer, I know, sponsored workshops virtually. So I know they have been busy. And Walt, if you have any additional information, that would be helpful. It's fun just to be as I say, a voyeur here this meeting. And Jane's, I know, been on also. And your meeting, the water quality meeting, was important to all of us. And it's still, I mean, a critical meeting for ALA to be involved with. So anyway, I appreciate the time that we've spent with you in the past and what we've gained from the information that has been presented at this meeting. So I'll leave it at that, Jim.
All right. Yeah, it's tough with COVID going on. So thanks for the update, Ed. All right, the 2020 Aquatic Invasive Species Management. This is just something general that we put on last year at this time. I know some of the lake associations are on and can speak for it. Dave, did you want to talk about Lake George first?
I apologize. I had to take a call for a second. So why don't you come back to me in a minute?
Okay. So let's see. Is John Nick's not on, right? No. So Bob, do you want to speak for Screw?
I know it looks like to date, obviously they are done harvesting. I think they took about 540 pounds out of Screw Lake, which is an extraordinarily low number. They're doing a really nice job up there and keeping their lake in a fairly decent condition. I haven't done the final tallies on Brant Lake, but an estimate that I just did quickly a second ago, it looks like they did somewhere around 8,000 pounds out of Brant. In talking with John Nick earlier in the month, he was pretty happy with conditions at Loon. I didn't get any numbers from him yet, but he was real impressed on the general conditions throughout Loon. You see also on here, it mentions Sunnyside. Sunnyside was a lake that we did some sampling and surveying on this year, part of another program we're doing. And we did identify one of the latest invasive aquatic species in the lake, that being brittle naiad, Naias minor. It's now been found in Hadlock over in Washington County. It's been It's been noted in Glen Lake. It's now been noted in Sunnyside, and I believe it's also been found in Lake George in the Dunns Bay region. So that's the latest plant that we're keeping an eye on as a new invasive. That's about it for me, unless there's questions.
All right.
Jim, I can jump back for Lake George if you like. Just a kind of a quick update on the milfoil program. We've had a pretty robust program this year, largely thanks to Chris Bilden's work on getting some additional funding through a grant. It was a 3-year grant for $600,000, and that's allowed us to be approximately $500,000 this year on Lake George, the largest amount we've ever had. And running along that same line, we've harvested more milfoil than any time in the recorded history, which is great. So we're up around 170,000 pounds right now. And the guys are wrapping up this Friday for the season. And we're also going to be taking some outside additional funding from my office and the LGA to remove about a ½ acre of long-standing milfoil mat in T Island Bay that's been there for about 20 years. Get that finally out of the lake because that bay is under control for the first time in many, many years. So I think we're making great progress. We have this year and next year still with a larger pot of money. And by that point, at this stage, we really are getting those large problematic bays under control, that we're not having to go back and spend weeks and weeks and weeks in these bays. Now we're just spending a few days. And that's kind of the goal that we've had for quite a while. So very happy with the progress, and we'll keep you posted.
All right. Anybody have any other questions, comments, or updates that they would like to share in regards to the invasive species management in our county?
I'm gonna put Rich Nawara on the spot here, but he had sent an email to me about the inspection station at Horicon as being the 4th busiest in the Adirondack Park. I don't know if that continued to be true through the remainder of the season, Rich or Gary?
Yeah, it continues to be true based on our inspections this year and looking at statewide inspections throughout the park. Yeah, we're about number 4, not only in inspections, but also decontaminations. Give you a number, at the Horicon launch, we had at least 6,000 inspections this summer. At Brant Lake, we had 3,700 inspections this summer. And we had 320 decontaminations. Our biggest hit of the year was a boat out of Saratoga Lake, which was infested with zebra mussels. Had we not had the wash station open, that individual would have launched in Schroon Lake. So he did come to the wash station first, and it took about a ½ an hour to decontaminate the guy. He had to go back twice. The rub here is that, yes, we have an invasive species transport law, but if an individual shows up at a decontamination station first, there's nothing much that law can do. So that individual was negligent. He knew he was infested with zebra mussels when he left Saratoga Lake, and he, fortunately enough, came to our decontamination station. But he was transporting invasive, no matter how you look at it. So DEC was called in, and an officer did show up, but that individual had already left the lake, so there's not much they could do about it. But at least they could have warned him, sent a warning letter out to the boater, because we did have his full registration number, so we could identify him, but I don't believe that happened. So I think ESLA and SLA are gearing up to communicate with the DEC, correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, to send a letter to the DEC encouraging a stricter law, a more robust law, and enforcement of the law, basically.
Yeah, Rich,
I think we also need to do more outreach, because clearly the message is not getting out there to everybody that they need to check their boats and make sure that they're clean, drained, and dry. I mean, you know, enforcement is important, but I think education is a huge factor in this too. And clearly the message is not getting to people before they leave home or before they, leave the prior lake, before they come to this area.
Well, some people will never get that message, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right, any other comments on that? So, good news, bad news, Rich. Bad news as they came, but the good news is the process and the program caught it. So, all right, moving down to grant opportunities. Lake Champlain Basin Program has offered up several grants. I'm not going to get into them all, but they seem to be one group that has some funding available. I know our office is putting in for a couple of grants, a stormwater grant and an invasive species grant. And the Lake George Association was putting in for 1 or 2 grants as well. I don't know, that's limited to the Lake Champlain Basin. So if you're in the Upper Hudson, you can't apply for these. I don't know if there's anybody else who may be applying for basin program grants right now. Allison, Dave, you heard anything?
None, we're not doing any within Warren County at the moment, no.
Okay. All right. The other one one of the ones that we deal with is a hazard mitigation plan through the New York State Office, Department of Homeland Security and your Office of Emergency Services. We'll be putting in for an update to the hazard mitigation plan. While you may not think that has anything to do with this committee, it does, because it addresses flooding, potential culverts and roads, and even dams. So there is a tie-in to the Water Quality Strategy Committee and Hazard Mitigation, along with all the communities. So I don't know if there's any others that are out there. I have not heard anything about DEC grants or CFAs, I should say. Just my opinion, I'll be surprised if we see anything before late fall, early winter, if lucky, but that's my opinion. So
there is
anyway.
There is a municipal MWRR grant for recycling and so on, education and coordination funding. So, and I see Dan Baruch is on here. Don't know if that's something the town would be interested in. I've talked to Kevin Hajos a little bit about maybe taking advantage of that opportunity, but the deadline is the end of the month. So it would seem like an all-out scramble, but we're considering it. But.
Okay. All right. Upcoming training opportunities. There haven't been many outside of Zoom. So if you have something that you would like to have sent around as far as training, please let me know, whether it's Zoom or in person, and then the individuals can make the calls on that. There are some things that have been going on. I actually went to a woods walk through the New York State Forest Owners Association a couple months ago on a Saturday. So there are still some trainings that are going on in person. But if you have something that you would like to have sent around, please let me know. The 2021 meeting dates, I placed there so you can get them on your calendar. We'll just to be determined whether they're in person, Zoom. I'm going to say that even if they are in person, we're going to have it via Zoom anyway. Seems to save people a lot of time. It does not, you don't get your donut is the one thing, but it is a good way to pull in some additional folks who are interested in this type of thing who may not have the availability coming up here. And I guess we can go right into the roundtable. Why don't we go ahead and start? There's some new people here. I'm just going to call you out. So Ms. Smith, up in the corner. You're muted. I know. It's the scramble. So.
Hi, my name is Eliza Smith. I live in Hague. I'm a property owner. My family and I own a couple of properties near the lake. And I'm also a real estate agent. I'm new this year. I'm just kind of trying to tune in and learn what's going on. And I'm mostly listening. I definitely have, opinions and insights, but at this point, I'm still just trying to kind of gather information and see what role I can play in all of this. I'm particularly interested in the septic issues and how I can just kind of help educate my clients and start to get involved. I'm very passionate about trying to protect the lake and seeing what we can do to, pretty aggressively regulate some of the pollution that's
Mhm.
going on here. So that's all for now. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I'm Mark Brown, Chairman of the Warren County Soil and Water, and I'm here as a learning experience, learning more about what's going on in the county to keep up on some of these programs, and that's all I have.
Rich Norwat? Anything else? You're muted, Rich.
I'm good, nothing new.
Okay. Chris?
I guess just thanks everybody for tuning in and weighing in on the septic law. It's been a long path. We're not to the end of the discussion yet. So certainly if anything crops up after the meeting or you're aware of other folks that are part of your associations, please have them share the input because now's the time to share that. And then also, for those of you that aren't aware, the census is going to, the 2020 census will be ending tomorrow. There was a push by a lot of states to keep the date set at October 31st for data collection. The Trump administration won their case yesterday in front of the Supreme Court to end it. So the last day for data collection will be tomorrow. If you haven't completed your census or know of anybody that hasn't completed their census, tell them to do it. It's super important for representation and for funding for our area. So, and we're looking at a possibility of a significant undercount this year. So that's all I've got.
Gary?
Gary Carl, East Shore Schooner Lake Association. You heard about boat inspections and our milfoil harvesting, but good news on both of those fronts. And with Emerald Ash Borer having come to our watershed and the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid not far away, our association is taking a harder look at what we can do to increase education and awareness on terrestrial invasives in our watershed. So you should see more about that from us in 2021.
Yeah, thank you. Randy?
Not a whole lot to report, but I just bring everybody's attention to our new education videos, our science from the sofa. You can find some details on our website. Just some short educational videos, basically having Kristen and Emily talking on their sofa and talking about some different topics as far as water quality goes. So pretty cool. Check them out.
Allison?
Sure. In addition to the Lake George Watershed Action Plan, our organization is also working on a drinking water source protection plan for Lake George. Basically, we identify all the community drinking water sources that pull from the lake and identify areas of protection and work with the communities to develop ways to further protect those sources. So, and in the long run, it will save community money through the treatment of the water. If you reduce the pollutants that go into the water at the source, you reduce the amount of treatments you need to do at the end point. This is a program that's sponsored by the New York State DEC and New York State Department of Health, and they would ideally like all communities to have this sort of plan in place. It's not only for public water sources that use surface water, they are also doing these for wells. So if any of your communities are interested, please reach out to me. It's not only our organization working in this watershed, there are a few consultants that are working with the state to do these things. So they are done at no cost to the community. So please let me know and I'll be in touch with the Department of Health and the DEC on that one for you.
Allison?
Yeah.
Was that solicitation just relevant for the communities in the Lake George watershed, or you're also talking about the Upper Hudson? Okay, cool.
The entire state.
Okay. Mr. Wick?
Thank you, Jim. Quick update or reminder for folks, we are currently out for public comment on our stormwater regulations that we've been working on for a few years. I know it's been discussed in this forum a few times. That date has been extended to November 27th, so people can see our draft stormwater, our stream corridor regulations were approved by Albany yesterday to go up for public comment as well. You're going to see those in the state register on October 28th. So we wanted to give folks the opportunity to be able to see the stream corridor regulations in concert with the stormwater regulations. Originally, you may recall, they were coupled into one package. We were required to separate those out. But if you do support what we're trying to do for the stormwater regulations and stream corridor, please feel free to drop an email to that effect. There's always people that tend to say, oh, this is a good idea, and then not write any type of correspondence to that. If somebody opposes it, they have no problem writing those letters, and Albany takes those comments pretty seriously. It doesn't have to be anything more than an email, but if you think what we're doing is important, then drop me an email. Thanks.
Okay. Paul.
I'm just always appreciative of letting me be a gadfly here, so thank you all.
No problem. Nick, Raul.
Let's see, a few project updates. We installed 750 square feet of permeable pavers on Lake Sunnyside on Sunnyside North Road. We installed a stormwater project on Flat Rock Road with the town of Lake George. Consisted of a serious icing issue on a steep hill, where we were able to get that water in 4 catch basins, a rock forebay, and a bioretention area. So that'll prevent a significant amount of de-icing materials. And we finished a NACD grant, which is the National Association of Conservation Districts. It was an ag grant with the Warrensburg Community Gardens. And it also included a hedgerow that's right on the Scroon River, so that will help filter stormwater, as well as we got every gardener in the community garden to cover crop all of their plots to also assist with nutrient leaching and stormwater. So quick little update, that's it.
All right. Now, Claudia, before you say anything, I got to ask, what kind of birds do you have?
They're conures.
Okay. That's a first. We can say that's a first for this water quality group. So.
Well, I'm glad to keep it entertaining for you guys.
Yeah, no problem. Any other comments or anything? All right. You're good? All right. Matt Simpson. Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you for the discussion on the septic reg. I think it's important that we get this process underway and make sure that we're doing everything we can to address any of the issues out there from private property owners and the public that may not be aware of this. One of the issues in some of the issues that we're dealing with in Horicott is 2/3 of my population have already left, and for the season, and it's very difficult to undertake something like this time of year. So we're actually working on it, getting our presentations ready, doing our work so that in the springtime, when our second homeowners or seasonal residents come back, we're ready to present to them, what we have planned and provide an opportunity for their input. So, but I just want to thank you for discussing this today.
Thank you. Mr. Dennison. I don't know if you're still there. Ms. Craig Sherman. Any comments? Nope.
Good morning.
There we go.
For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm the Association Executive CEO of the Southern Adirondack Realtors. Thank you for this excellent discussion this morning. We did have a bunch of our realtor people on, some of whom are on Supervisor Bramer's work group, because we have been tracking and following the septic inspection process through the local level. Some of the municipalities we've been involved in that, as well as at the county level. And we see ourselves as kind of a far-ranging based on the topics you talked about, the consumer protection and education, as well as maintaining the water quality, obviously, which maintains property values. Our association has over 500 realtors who service this area, and we really see ourselves as a vehicle to get information out, not only to those realtors, but then to spread that far and wide through their tentacles to all their clients and their customers. So we're happy to be involved in the conversation as much as we can.
Thank you. And thank you for sending that link over. So,
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Dan Baruch, any comments, Dan? Well, he might be scrambling to unmute, or he's ignoring us, which is fine. We'll skip Dan and go to Walt. Mr. Lender.
Sorry, nothing to add to that except a great deal of appreciation for all the help with the sediment pond cleanouts, both at Westbrook and throughout the rest of Warren County. I know Randy and you guys did a lot of work on that. I really appreciate it.
No problem. And last but not least, I see that Ms. Craig sneaks in towards the end. So Gwen, any questions or comments or anything you'd like to say?
No, I missed stuff, but I appreciate you inviting me, and sorry about that. I'll bug you later though.
This was recorded.
Okay.
So with Don Lehman, being at the county now, I think that he's going to be our conduit. We're going to send him all of the information. So maybe he can even help Chris revamp the website page for this committee. But you can look at that, or feel free to contact myself or anyone else, obviously, as you know. So
yeah, thank you, Jim.
okay, I'd like to thank. I have a couple final comments, but I'd like to thank Claudia and Chris. That was an excellent presentation and layout of a difficult and circuitous program. So I'll be interested in seeing what happens with that. But thanks. I think that worked very well. And Mike's not here, but I think that the wetland restoration was very good as well. So as I said, if any of you are not part of the do not get emails from me, please shoot me your email and I can add you to this this email group. There's 4 meetings a year, and usually when there's trainings or symposiums or something, you'll get an email from me. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and email me or call me and I can add you on. I'm always looking for presentations or presenters for this. This month we are fortunate to have two different presentations, but that's really what makes the meetings go, provides a lot of comments. So if you have any questions or subjects or anything, please let me know. Gary, you mentioned the emerald ash borer, Hemlock woolly adelgid. So something that we've been talking about for years now. And we have ramped up our forestry program here. Maren Alexander, who's not on the meeting right now, she had been earlier. And I do a lot of the forestry work, and Dean also does some of it. And you've probably seen it, it's been in the paper, but she would be upset at me if I didn't point out that we do have the Warren County Tree Challenge. You might see the posters out and about. I know the supervisors who are on have seen this. It's pretty interesting, and we've been interviewed by News Channel 10 and the Post Star and North Country Public Radio, and I just kind of laugh, and someone, with everything going on in the world, they want this, and I couldn't figure out why, and someone just said, because it's good news, it's not politics, it's not COVID, it's not the state of the world, and we're like, oh, it makes me feel good. Yeah, it does. So please join the Warren County Tree Challenge and find some interesting trees out there. If you have any other questions or comments, please let me know, as always. Are there any final questions or anything?
Jim, can you share some of the links that were put with the email that goes out? Just share some of the links about the comments and where to find the Connecticut law and so on, and Randy's comments.
Yep, we'll, we have, in the chat there. I actually had from Louise, I actually have that open on another browser page. So, because I was going to send that. So yeah, we can get the all the information out there. I think that would be handy and helpful. And again, this is recorded, so all this information should be there, and we'll get that to Don. So,
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Good meeting.
all right. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Claudia?